Howdy, howdy. We are live another Friday night to kick off the weekly Tex-Trek show, and we have some Deep Space Nine fun and goodness to discuss tonight. Dave, are you ready to get back to season 5 of Deep Space Nine?
If you're asking whether I'm ready to see Odo get laid, then yes.
Yeah, big happenings. We have the losing of Odo's V card, the reveal of Bashir's secrets. He's not who you think he is, and then he's also not who you think he is.
Yep.
And all kinds of the betrayal of Ducat. So all kinds of crazy stuff. So without further ado, let's get the show started. I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 201st installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek, old and new. And tonight we're talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 5. This is our second of 3 podcast episodes focused on Season 5 of DS9. So we're going to be specifically discussing kind of the middle 9 episodes out of the 26 episode season. So that's going to be season 5, episode 10, Rapture, all the way up to season 5, episode 18, Business as Usual.
Yep, we'll start with the Messiah, and end with arms-dealing genocidal Quark.
Yes, yeah. We'll see Sisko become the Kwisatz Haderach, and then end with Quark
weighing 28 million lives.
Yeah, we finally find his limit. So it's gonna be a lot of fun stuff to talk about. There's some good episodes in between. We're
Absolutely.
Gonna have baby Kirayoshi be born. We're gonna have the really cool 2-parter of the Purgatory's Shadow and Inferno's Flame 2-parter. I always forget which one is first, but it's Purgatory's Shadow is first. When we're trying to blow up a sun, that's Inferno's Light. That's the way to remember it.
And for me, at least so far, I feel like what is probably Worf's most amazing sort of physical martial act that he's ever done.
Yeah, this ain't TNG Worf who gets his ass kicked in 4 seconds.
This
is DS9 Worf. So, before we start unpacking these episodes, though, just a little bit of housekeeping. First and foremost, big thank you to all of our patrons out there. We really appreciate everyone who chips in over on the Patreon. It means a lot to us. So thank you, Starfleet Boy, Cake is Eternal, Gay Clevin Lundstrom, Crazy Dutchie, Joanne Robertson, Quark Spar, and our anonymous supporters. We will be doing a patron watch long. If you're checking us out live on Friday, it'll be tomorrow on Saturday. We do one every month. We're watching Trials and Tribulations, and we had a lot of fun, doing the Amok Time watch long a month ago. So we're gonna continue to do this. If you come into the Patreon as low as $2 a month, we have some different tiers, but we want to have a $2 a month option to make it really affordable. If you come in at any tier, you get into the watch alongs, and there's also some additional perks. So check those out if you're interested in joining and being a part of those watch alongs. Also, just want to remind everyone that Star Trek Las Vegas is coming up in late August. I think it starts the 24th and then runs through that weekend. I will be there in Las Vegas. So if anyone wants to see me, that's where you can find me. That's also when we're going to have the premiere of Star Trek Lower Decks. And so we'll be covering Lower Decks starting the premieres on the 25th, so we'll have a stream on the day following on that Friday, and then release, wherever you get your podcast per usual. Even though I'll be on the road in Vegas, I'll have the mobile emitter set up, so we'll still get the show out.
Hell yeah!
And then next week we'll be wrapping up DS9 season 5, and then I don't know what's gonna happen between next week in Vegas. We might come up with some fun stuff. We'll see, but still working on that. But yeah, so DS9 season 5, Rapture through business as usual. Let's just go ahead and get started with Rapture.
Yeah.
So this episode was written by teleplay by Hans Beimler and story by L.J. Strom and directed by Jonathan West. A shock Sisko receives when the holosuite system shorts. What is it? A shock Sisko receives when the holosuite system shorts gives him psychic insight to a lost Bajoran city. That's kind of a tongue twister.
Tongue twister.
But
you know what I was thinking as I was watching this is that what happens to him is somewhere between like a very vivid mushroom trip where everything is like hyper real, and Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters, driven to learn.
Yeah, he's got that little nod in there where he's playing with his food.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is also the debut of the black and gray uniforms on DS9.
Right.
Which I think kind of they work really well on these backgrounds and stuff. It's not like on Discovery when they changed their uniforms to those gray ones and didn't really match the sets. So that they kind of lucked out there. But yeah, this is right after First Contact would have been released, and so this is kind of becoming like the new standard uniform in Starfleet. But yeah, it's kind of like the search for Atlantis, the Bajoran city of Bahala, this ancient city that was lost, and he does kind of become like he's like walking around like he's Jesus, like telling people like don't worry, your father will or your son will forgive you, Admiral, or like you don't belong here, go home, or you're gonna have a good harvest this year, stop worrying.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. It's Sisko is usually kind of reticent about his potential status as the prophet, or the emissary. I mean, and this is one of those cases where it's like he sees the light, and so he embraces it.
Yeah, we saw him, previously when he had a rival for the position of emissary. We kind of saw him embrace his role as the emissary there with the Bajoran people.
Yeah.
And kind of accept the role. I think this episode it's more about like him accepting it on the other side, like his relationship with the prophets, and he's like, oh no, I actually like do like these entities in the wormhole. I like them interfering with my life after all, because this is actually pretty cool getting to see all the past, see all the future, and trying to wrap my head around it. And he almost gets lost in all of that.
Well, I'm a skeptical guy at heart, but one thing that it's never find myself really able to argue against is personal experience, and that's kind of what this episode is all about. He is simply seeing things at a level that other people cannot. It's like it drops the Paul Atreides on him.
Yeah, so if you've seen Dune, or if you've read the books, I should say, I guess the movies haven't really gotten into this stuff too much. I guess it dabbles with it a little bit, but it's weird, how close he is with Jake, and how we know that relationship is like the most important thing to him. But he was still he was willing to like sacrifice himself to these visions. I think that's when like he's like really kind of drowning in it when. We saw in the Visitor when he was like he knows what would happen to Jake if Jake has to grow up without him.
Right. Cyric Lofton gave another really strong performance in this one. I think his fear about losing his dad to this it's just fantastic, and also like Avery Brooks. That kind of anguished quality he has over how close he came, which is still that sort of messianic zeal. They're just great performances from both those characters. Father, like just in general, did you like this episode? Were you enjoying watching Sisko surrender to this?
Yeah, I think this is a fun one because it, especially like knowing what comes later in the show, it sets up a lot
Mm,
of things, and some things kind of make sense, like why Cisco might be so susceptible to these visions and stuff. But it sounds like a phenomenon that's been known to happen on Bajor. They have the Pa Temfar, and there's a science fiction explanation for all of it. But you know, kind of the cool thing, this episode, it kind of does get into like the faith versus science stuff. We see different perspectives. So no matter where you fall on the spectrum, I think you see like a character voicing that opinion. You know, we have like Kira, just like she literally believes that yeah, these wormhole aliens are the gods of her people, and
right?
they listen to her prayers, and you know, like she's just a true, literally a true believer. Uh, Worf is a guy who just believes in like the value of faith. You know, he says as long as the captain's faith is strong, you know, that's what gives him strength. He'll
Mm-hmm.
survive if he believes he will survive. So he's kind of more of just like, you know, just faith in general is just a good idea. It's a necessity. And then you have Dax, who's like, you know, I just keep an open mind, and I'm the science officer, and I think all like these weird possibilities are cool, and you know, like maybe we should kind of explore and dabble with it. And then you have, you know, O'Brien, who's like no, this is all just too weird, too freaky, too dangerous. I just want Julian to be taking care of him. And you know, if
Yeah,
Julian says it's unsafe, if the doctor says it's not healthy, then we need to just pull the plug on this whole thing. And even though that's not really Julian, this is the changeling infiltrator. Spoilers for a later episode, but this is where
right.
the infiltration happened.
I was trying to figure out, like, and as I, after having watched that episode reveal a little down the line, when it would have been occurring.
Yeah,
Um,
it was right here. They decided that they would make it where the uniforms change. So because you know, when we see the true Bashir later, he's still wearing the old uniform. And Ron Moore said that yeah, this is when the writers decided this is where it was different. Now the actor Alexander Siddig didn't know until a few episodes later, so he's not playing them any different. But canonically, this is the changeling.
that's interesting. Yeah, I guess that. Well, a few episodes later, or no, well, O'Brien is, mentions him being a little bit different, and
Hmm.
there's God, it's at the beginning of one of those later episodes when somebody, oh, I know, it's when Garrick says you've changed since I first met you, and
Mm-hmm.
it is like I was like, oh yeah, he just thinks he's grown, and he has that's the thing, he has changed as a person, but we didn't know that he had recently quite literally been swapped. But
But
they
it
do.
makes
There is some
sense.
foreshadowing.
It makes sense that the Dominion would be like, yeah, this guy can see the future. That's probably not good because we have plans, you know. So we do need to
Right.
like take this away from him. But he,
Right.
he he sees like a swarm of locusts that shows up and goes to Cardassia instead of Bajor. Uh,
Mm,
so we can figure out, you know, an episode we'll discuss later will kind of explain what that is. The
yeah.
pivotal thing here, I guess, is Cisco keeping Bajor from joining the Federation. What John Luke told him was his mission in the first episode of the show. You know, he goes running into that room. He's like, "No, Bajor must stay out of the Federation. It's too soon." So Bajor remains, you know, the independent Republic of Bajor.
Well, as I'm watching this the first time, I was like, oh, holy shit, this is an episode where Bajor joins the Federation. They announce it. It's
Mhm.
like happening, and I was like, oh, I wonder what repercussions that will have. Well, as it turns out, it gets shot down by the end of the episode. But like that was like for me, not knowing what was to come, a kind of a big roller coaster. Just seeing that the possibility was right about to be there, and then thrown away. I kind of felt like the admiral at that point, or is it the admiral? Is he an
Yeah,
admiral?
Admiral Watley. He called
Or
DS9 a spinning bicycle wheel.
yeah, where I was like, yeah, could you go and handle that shit, Cisco, because you're threatening like something really important here.
But now, like Starfleet's hands are tied because they're like, well, shit, we can't like fire Cisco and take his commission away and move him off of this post because then we'll probably lose Bajor forever. So
Right, right. It is one of the dangers of dealing with messianic figures. It's like it's all sort of well and good when when it's sort of helping out your own self interests, and then if it turns against you, you don't know. Those tides may be uncontrollable. That's
that's
another
really
sort of
getting into the Dune novels
Dune,
there.
right? For sure.
It gave us that funny joke where Quark revealed the wrong flag. You know, he's trying to have like the celebration for joining the Federation, and instead he dropped down the Klingon banner. So he's just ready for whoever to take over the station. He has a
Yeah,
flag for them.
it called to mind the old Simpsons bit where he's like, "I for one welcome our new ant overlords." Like the instant an ant goes across the camera, as in the shot of the what is it, space shuttle or space station. Yes.
We also get to see Kai Wen in this episode, and we
Mm.
get a little bit more substance and nuance and backstory for her. You know, we find out during the occupation she spent 5 years in a prison camp being whipped for preaching the Bajoran religion.
Yeah, I still found it hard to sympathize with her because I was like, I don't know, is she telling it how it really happened? You know, I just feel like I can never trust anything she says. And that she had her own designs. What did they make out? Did she have a particular? Because she's going to ask what she wants to says she wants to ask the emissary for forgiveness, right?
Right. This is the first time she's accepted Sisko as the emissary.
Yeah. And
She's
and do
kind of
we
rejected him up until now.
are we led to believe that she is doing it like she never does anything without self-interest? Somewhere in there.
Well, I think now she's just. I think she does, really have faith in the prophets, and I think now like she just can't like deny like, oh yeah, I guess he really is the chosen one. I guess I have to admit I was wrong.
Yeah. I don't know where her journey ends. I know that she has been among the most hated villains for me in all of Trekdom. But I think well portrayed. Like I think the actress has always done a good job. I think sometimes thankless to play somebody as duplicitous as that, but she's always done good with it. I did notice early on that the thing where I liked seeing Cisco kind of do the work of the sort of archaeological stuff before he kind of has the moment. And that there was that sort of thing like the Blade Runner Esper device where he's doing the analysis and his like Photoshop work and stuff too, to try and to work it out. Anyway, just
Mm.
one of those small things. I liked seeing the work done, that sense of that time commitment and the detail.
I know you're a big fan of Cassidy Yates, so before we have to move on to the next episode, just were you happy to see her out of prison finally?
You say that sarcastically because I assume because Cassidy was not or early on. I was not really liking her. I think
Well,
when
I thought that last episode
it's
you
true,
changed your tune.
right? So yeah, I didn't know if you were just trying to troll me or not. Because yes, when I found out about her kind of associations with the Maquis and all that, I started to see sort of a depth to the character that I hadn't seen before, and I definitely liked her more at that point. Yeah, I actually felt bad that she should come back and sort of have to run immediately into this sort of schism. Sometimes that's how life is, though.
Yeah, he's like, "Get in the runabout. We're gonna go find Bajoran Atlantis." Like, "Oh no, I'm in a coma. I'm gonna die now." It kind of like
You know what? The
ends.
usual tradition is the person who's been in prison is the one who finds religion.
Yeah,
She came back and she's like, "Guess what?" And Cisco's like, "Guess what?"
but she kind of has something to like bond with Jake over. Like watching his father on the
Terror.
on the hospital bed.
Yeah.
They kind of bond through that. But
Right, right. At this point, there's they've been close to they've been a family of some of a stripe. Um,
uh,
so
one last thing for me before we move on to the next episode, I just want to point out Garrick went to prison for trying to blow up the changeling homeworld,
right.
and he got out of prison before Cassidy Yates got out for aiding the Maquis. So
Uh,
she had a longer sentence than Garrick did.
so that's funny. I'm sure that like kind of behind the scenes that there's not a whole lot of thought given to prison sentences and comparative stuff. They just don't think about that a whole lot. But that's a fair point. I just wanted to say I thought the ending was sweet with them all sort of holding hands there. I liked these sort of assertion of the family there.
Yeah, and that's something that'll definitely grow as the show goes on. Let's move on to the next episode, The Darkness and the Light, teleplay by Ronald D. Moore, story by Brian Fuller, directed by Michael Viger. An assassin targets her resistance call An assassin targets her resistance colleagues, then captures Kira. So this episode, it was the first Brian Fuller writing credit, I think maybe out of his entire career, but also
Oh,
his first in Star Trek, obviously. He'd go on to develop Star Trek Discovery. He become a big writer on Voyager for a little bit, and he made all these other TV shows too. He's a guy who used to be obsessed with death. Now he's kind of obsessed with mushrooms. All of his TV shows have to do with mushrooms now. But initially, like everything had to do with like death, and so I'm not surprised that his first Star Trek episode is about a serial killer.
yep. I looked this. I would looked up something on this on Memory Alpha. Later on, that would bite me in the ass because I did find out. I found out about Bashir about 3 hours before I watched the episode. Damn it, where the reveal would have happened. We'll get to that in a minute. But I saw that I think a reference that it was like inspired by the Agatha Christie story, and then there were none, which is a story I really like. Incidentally, it's sort of a locked room mystery, or in this case, it's an island mystery. A bunch of people called to an island who start disappearing. Now, that's not quite actually how this plays out. It's if it's inspired by it, it's very much the episode is its own thing. But it's a format I like. The trying to figure out a killer who seems one step ahead of everything.
Yeah, it's a pretty common, story structure, but it was fun to see here, and Ron Moore actually scripted the episode based on Brian Fuller's story, but I really like some of the choices Ron Moore made. As a kid, this episode really frustrated me because I really liked Kira's resistance buddies,
Yeah.
uh, Pharrell and Lupaza, and I thought it was so shitty. They're like, oh, cool, they showed up, I like them, and then immediately after that, they're dead.
Yeah, it kind of sucks because in some ways, it almost could have been they could have killed off no names, right? They could have been some other people she had worked with. But it does have more impact because of that. And I feel like the episode has sort of like it amps up the dramatic quotient on it. It's pretty creepy. The messages and stuff that are
Yeah,
mentioned.
that's
The
one. That's one. That's
Yeah.
one.
What is it? They call it a remat detonator. I don't know if
Yeah, the transporter death, and that was gruesome.
it's on the grislier side of corpses they've ever shown in the show, I
Yeah,
think.
and transporter accidents, transporter accidents have gotten pretty gruesome before. Look at the motion picture.
Sure.
This is one of the best episodes for Nana visitors. She just makes me cry when I'm watching this episode, like so much. Like when I see her in pain, it makes me in pain. The
Hmm.
the whole story about the woman who died in the transporter, um, Trenton Fala, just like her story, like she was always like so scared and so terrified. She just cleaned the offices in the Cardassian building, and was always scared they were gonna catch her. And I
Yeah.
think she was the bravest one out of all of us. And you actually like see like a tear roll off of Nana Visitor's face onto the bio bed when she's talking to Odo about uh having to go through all this. And
She's clearly able to summon that kind of emotion, and she is one of my favorite characters on the show. And whenever she gets these kind of emotional scenes, they tend to, luckily, they are built around strong writing. Like I'd regret it if if the actress was doing so much work and it wasn't something I really cared about. But like she gets a lot of good scenes, and yeah, I was fully on board at this one. It's also like kind of she gets to do something cool, which is I'm sure somewhat unusual. That as while she is pregnant, she gets to kick some ass. like
Yeah.
like it's like it does feel you feel like she's in heightened danger, right? She's protecting two people, but also like when she has to get past those security guards, she just like kicks the shit out of them.
Yeah, and Nana Visitors had already had her kid, Django, who
Okay,
is
so
who
yeah,
was
they're just
already He was actually born in the Ryza episode, "Let He Who Is
Hmm.
Without Sin." That's why Alexander Siddig really hates his performance in the when he breaks up with Lita in that episode, because
Mhm.
that was like right after like his kid was born, and he was so distracted because he was like, "Oh, I want
Eh,
to be with like my newborn son I just had with Nana visitors and not be here."
I guess
But
that's invisible to me, which good on him. It didn't. It's seems like it didn't impact at least my uh viewing of that episode. I had problems with that episode, but he wasn't one of them.
do you think it was wrong of Kira to endanger the O'Brien baby by going after this serial
Mm.
killer? I've seen some people, kind of hate on this episode because they think that's irresponsible of
It's
her.
interesting. It's actually one of the ones I've liked most this season. I think, arguably, yes, that's a reasonable read of it. I think because there is a sort of a certain tropes involved, of you're tracking down the killer, you're the one doing that. That and that weird sort of meta thing. Yeah, main character's probably not going to get killed doing that. Although they get to a pretty scary close place, and what is going to happen is also very creepy. The what removal of the baby and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think because I'm sort of used to that sort of trope, I didn't think about it as much, and it didn't bother me.
I think she's justified because this killer had made it clear that he can get to people wherever they are.
Right,
And
like her baby wasn't safe
right,
anyway, and so she had to. I think that's a pretty reasonable read on it too. Like
she basically
she had to stop him.
she sees that she was wrong and Pharrell and Lupiza were right because they wanted to go after him.
Yeah,
And she
that's
was like,
right.
"No, like just stay here on the station. Odo can keep us safe." Yeah. Well, apparently he can't. So yeah, we got to go after him.
Yeah, normally they would. That'd be a pretty safe thing. Odo's a pretty good guy to have watching over you. But throughout this season, and it's a general Deep Space Nine trope, the bad guys are very effective. Whether it's or antagonists, I should say. I don't know if they're always even bad guys, but like Eddington is super effective. Changelings super effective. This particular Vengeance Seeker
Yeah.
very effective.
Salaran Prin. He cleaned uniforms for Gul Parak, who murdered
Yeah,
Bajorans for not displaying the
man.
Cardassian flag. Ron Moore said that he took particular pride, though, in writing this episode because he wanted to make sure that Kira wouldn't be kind of wishy-washy. Like, yes, we
Yeah,
all did bad things during the war, and I'm sorry that this happened to you. And
yeah.
uh, but no, she doesn't do any of that. She just says like fuck you. You were part of the occupation. I'm sorry that we had to blow y'all up, but we were going to do what we had to do to get free.
She
And
says
I'm
you
not.
were a legit target.
Yeah, you were a
Um,
legit target.
I liked that too. That's one of the reasons why this is going to be an episode that continues to stand out for me, and it'll stay in my memory. Is that she was unrepentant on that, and um, what was I going to say? I'm pulling up my notes here. Um, that guy, I liked seeing her kind of again do the work of tracking him down. He's a creepy dude, and I know that's what I wanted to mention in the that first season episode. It's a great episode, duet, but I had some issues with Kira's kind of ability to forgive at that point. I didn't quite buy it. I was like, not that doesn't seem who she is. This seemed like who she is.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I think if this guy was actually trying to like hold, Cardassia responsible for their war crimes, she
right,
would be singing a different tune, but he's not. He's trying to, have revenge. So yeah, she's not she's going to send him to the cemetery, and she does. So
right. And
uh
yet that the guy, of course, he's not portrayed. He is portrayed as pretty deranged. The way he talks, like in a third person, like narrator style
hmm,
about her doom and stuff like that. He's off his rocker. But he's it's not as if I don't have any sympathy for him. I'm not I'm not a Bajoran who quite feels it the way Kira does, and I'm like, oh man, that's like kids died. I think they said kids died, right? When the bombing she did.
yeah, that dude's family I guess was in the
Yeah.
building.
But like, I'm like, yeah, if you think about it, how could she possibly have avoided that? They were occupying her world. That they brought families with them is on the Cardassians.
Uh There's another cool thing in here with Nog actually helping to track down the killer and stuff, and helping figure out, these voice messages, they're actually using Kira's voice, but he was using like his Ferengi ears, so it's kind of cool to see it. We'll see more of it
a few
in a
episodes down the
moment.
line, we see Ferengi super hearing. I liked it. It was kind of cool to remember the, some physiological differences between the different aliens. A lot of people are, Ferengi could just be kind of greedy humans sometimes, and it's nice to be reminded that, they actually are a little biologically different.
And I guess the other thing I like in this episode, speaking of Ferengi, is when Worf quoted a rule of acquisition to Jadzia,
Yep.
about treat those in debt to you like family, exploit them. And she's like, how do you know the rules of acquisition? And Worf says, I'm a graduate of Starfleet Academy. I know many things. It's like, yeah, Worf went to college. He's not an idiot.
Right. Yeah, sometimes writers forget that. I also liked their banter there, and that it was kind of about something a little bit lighter. I was like, it's helping clear the anti-sex Worf from Risa that episode.
The jealous, prudish Worf.
Yeah, I was happy to see that kind of gone.
Well,
but yeah, this was actually one of my favorite episodes of the season so far.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think it doesn't get enough praise. I think it's a really great episode, but there's so many great ones in DS9. I think some of the real gems like this kind of get buried.
Somehow
but yeah,
they jump out for me a little bit more when they're Kira related, and a lot of the Dominion War and Bajoran occupation stories tend to be really good.
Well, let's move on to season 5, episode 12, The Begotten, written by Renee Echeverria and directed by Jesus Salvador Trevino. Deep Space Nine celebrates the birth of the O'Brien baby as Odo and Dr. Mora struggle to save the life of a changeling infant. So this is Odo gets his groove back.
Right. These are all exciting things for me. I didn't know that was going to happen. This episode itself is a little bit, it's kind of both hit and miss for me, but I was excited by that ending. I didn't actually guess that was going to be the case. I don't know, I think I've told you, I don't, with mysteries and big arcs, I don't tend to think a whole lot ahead. I'm usually pretty in the moment. And I knew something could potentially develop out of it, maybe with the changelings, but I expected it might be more about the nature of the way he relates to them, possible changelings in the future that are not so don't have the attitudes of the Dominion. But yeah, I didn't expect that he would be getting his changeling status back.
Yeah, it was cool seeing him basically take this inanimate object, like this puddle of goo. I know inanimate's not a good way of describing it. It's actually very animated, but taking what looks to us as just like an object, this is like some liquid, and like having these conversations and stuff with it. I think that's like a pretty cool performance from Renee, and I also really enjoy him patching things up with Dr. Mora, kind of, understanding him a little bit more. Mora kind of apologizing, and Odo kind of being more sympathetic. It's something I definitely appreciate more now as an adult than as a kid. But yeah, it's something that I think a lot of us, kind of go through. As the older you get, the more you understand your parents. It's cliche to say that, but it is true. And there's also, kind of a joy in, fostering a young life or something like that Odo,
Sure.
Probably never expected to have, and then it's cool to see Odo happy in celebration mode when he's getting drunk in Quarks.
Those were my favorite scenes. Were mostly about Odo and the child, and I thought his performance was great in a lot of these moments, and that it actually kind of had me thinking about more like the broader concepts of science fiction. And some people who don't, there's like some people out there who just don't do science fiction.
Yeah.
And it's not as if there aren't enough great stories out there in the world that that's you're not going to die if you don't watch sci-fi. But I'm like, man, if you can't like see the sort of the beauty of this, how you can have an actor doing something that seems like it should be absurd. He is talking to this bowl of essentially kind of gelatin, but like injecting as much intensity and emotion into it as any Shakespearean actor holding the
Horatio's skull.
Yeah, well, Horatio is who he's talking to. The skull is the other guy. But
yeah.
Yes, that scene and the Gravedigger scene in Hamlet, Like, yes, we all should be able to understand that actors can like bring almost anything, any amount of emotion and convincingness to a situation. And this is a perfect example of sci-fi doing an amazing job of it. You know, doing something universal with something so seemingly esoteric as a gelatinous alien form. Um, what I didn't love was I guess trying to, I don't know, I guess represent the spare the rod, spoil the child perspective. I thought it was a little repetitious that, you know, Odo's kind of indictments of him, while valid, were, I just kind of heard them a lot in the episode. And then, yeah, I didn't love the notion of trying to, I don't know, I guess sort of find this middle ground between a guy who I felt like represented, like, you know, giving kids a whooping, and the you know, Odo as the, I guess, touchy feely parent is what he would be considered in the 90s. I don't know if Mora needed the voice that he did, and I don't know if Mora was I thought maybe as apologetic as I would have liked her to have been.
What about
So
the B story with Kira's birth?
I was anxious for Kira because I was like, stop that arguing, you pieces of shit. But I also cracked up at like, I loved when what's his name arrived late. Is it Shakar?
Shakar, yeah.
When he arrived late and like O'Brien does his little gong angrily at him, it's like dong, like kind of gives him this glare. Um, and like overall, I like that they showed that though. I was glad that everybody got to kind of have their to chill out and you know, see the birth. Um, yeah, overall, like I liked it all right, but yeah, I thought it was maybe like slightly too broad comedy to have the sort of the bickering, you know, O'Brien with and Shakar.
Next time you're gonna have a baby, leave my girlfriend out of it.
Yeah, not cool, bro. Not cool. Had
It,
that
it kind of
argument before
it does make
that
sense
day.
that like I guess like the head of state of the entire planet would be busy and probably running late and stuff. But it's interesting to me. There were a lot of budgetary constraints in season 5 because they spent so much money on trials and tribulations, and they actually wanted to have Shakar in the, I guess, 2 previous episodes. They wanted to have him in Rapture, because when they're, you know, signing the treaty or the agreement or whatever to bring Bashir into the Federation, they wanted to have him there, but they're like, oh, we can't afford to bring on another guest star. And then they
Hmm.
wanted to have him in the previous episode, the Darkness and the Light, because, you know, it's his resistance cell. They're literally called the Shakar resistance cell.
Right,
That,
right.
you know, like he would be he's probably easy to defend on, you know, he has like Bajoran Secret Service or whatever, but, you know, you think that would at least come up within the episode. So, but no, instead they use him here to be like the comic relief in the baby episode about Odo and Kira both losing their babies.
And yeah, that I liked that ending. Um, I think I saw. Did I see that there was some change to that? Oh,
There was
right.
kind of
Kira
a
was.
last minute addition. Nana Visitors was like, I think she would, you know, be kind of sad about giving up this life that she carried all these months, and so they added to the scene, which is crazy because this is such like it's like kind of like the most important moment. It ties the A story and B story together.
Hmm.
Uh, but
Yeah, it's always wild to me how sometimes those you know, an actor's influence on a storyline, you know, can be like vitally important. And sometimes what we think of as like just a key aspect of some movie or TV show was something last minute. It's pretty wild. But I did like that. I thought that was a neat bit of connection between the two of them.
one last thing for me, but
Mhm.
now knowing that this Dr. Bashir is actually a changeling infiltrator, it's kind of interesting that, you know, he wasn't able to do more to save this baby. So I'm thinking that he must have known that that baby, the radiation, like it was past the point of no return. There was no saving it. Otherwise, like he wouldn't have, you know, turned it over to Odo and Mora like that. But
Right.
you know,
The
maybe he
changelings are very much about self-preservation and
right. They
generally
love their own.
about unity. Yeah, except when somebody turns on them like Odo did.
But even with, you know, they're still kind of protective of him. Like the Martok changeling like wouldn't let Odo like go face Galron. He didn't want him to be killed. Like they turned him human, but they're still kind of protective of him.
Right.
So
They didn't kill him.
yeah, maybe he was also thinking like, oh well, maybe this will give Odo his changeling powers back. So that's kind of something that I would like. So maybe
Yeah.
I don't know.
If they were to talk about it in a book, it'd actually be an interesting thing to expand on a little bit. I jotted down a line that made me laugh. That's just from early on, where Worf walks across the scene of with Odo, and he says, "Constable, why are you talking to your beverage?"
Yeah.
Just that's good stuff.
Also, the other funny moment I guess was Quark like negotiating, like, I'll give it to you for 5 slips of latinum. Odo's like, it's alive. 10 slips. Oh, it's sick. Oh, well, 8 slips.
Yeah, that's good material. That's good material.
Yeah, well, we'll go on to the next episode. I think this is a big one for a lot of people. Season 5, episode 13, For the Uniform, written by Peter Allen Fields and directed by Victor Lobel. Sisko obsessively pursues Maquis leader Michael Eddington. So yeah, this is the return of Eddington, dangerous Maquis criminal. Oh, we also get the hollow communicator, which
Yeah. Did I
only
see that
gets
this
used
was
in
a
2 episodes.
short-lived thing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're
It's
gonna
kind of,
discuss both episodes that use it.
yeah, it's kind of a too bad that was like it. I actually I see some pretty cool stuff in it, and part of it is that Eddington is like. By the way, these next 3 episodes represent like probably my favorites of the maybe my favorites of the season so far.
Mm.
It was such a good little batch of 3 in a row. I think
It's interesting. Our friend Thad on Twitter said that these 3 and then the one that follows it, Dr. Bashir, I presume that those 4 episodes are prime Deep Space Nine in his opinion.
Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to remember where Dr. Bashir, I had like 1 or 2 minor issues with.
We'll get to it in a moment.
We'll get to it. But here, like, it is crazy to me how successful Eddington is in this episode. Like, man, no wonder Sisko gets as worked up as I've ever seen him. Like, arguably more than he is over Dominion stuff. Because he gets fired essentially from chasing Eddington in this, and he just loses at every turn. It's pretty brutal. Eddington's so they play him out to be like as cagey as any military leader or rebel ever was.
Yeah, for the first time ever, Sisko is pulled off of a case. He's already mad at Eddington for tricking him previously. Being a snake in the grass on the station, betraying him, using his position as the security officer on the station to aid the Maquis. I love Odo telling Sisko, like, did you ever point out to Starfleet that they insisted on assigning Eddington to the station because they didn't trust me? Sisko's like,
Yeah.
no, and Odo's like, would you mind pointing that out to them?
Yeah, completely fair call on his part. I think I don't know if this is kind of like obviously part of what galls Sisko is that it all happened under him. He even mentions he's like, I put him up for a promotion. He is pissed.
Yeah, I took him to a baseball game in the Hollow Suite.
Yeah, it's personal, but also Eddington kind of always dangles the moral high ground over him. He's like, I'm not a villain. He's like, we didn't kill these people. We don't do that. He keeps on throwing it in Sisko's face, and part of me thinks that Sisko is pissed because Eddington is kind of right. It's having a tough time dealing with some of that. His Starfleet idealism is clashing with their kind of this guerrilla movement.
Yeah, he does really rub it into Sisko's face, and he keeps making references to Les Mis, which I've never read or
Oh
watched
yeah,
any of the adaptations or anything. I'm kind of like Dax. I'm like, what's that guy's Victor Hugo?
yeah.
I tried reading The Hunchback one time, and I couldn't get into that, so I kind of just never had any interest. But everything I know about Les Mis, I know from this episode. I know
You got to say Les Mis. You got to say Les Mis.
Whatever. See, I don't even know how to say stuff because
everything I know is from the musical, which is kind of what most modern people will know. But I know a number. I've actually wanted to read the book because I love the musical, and I know a number of people who've recommended the book. It is one of those kind of big old 800-page kind of giants though, and I haven't gotten around to it. But yeah, it's a portrayal of a sort of hypocritical, cruel police officer desperately in pursuit of a guy who's very, very much wrongly accused. It's like it's literally the he stole bread to feed his family kind of thing. Um, and seeing that, the ultimately the police inspector Javert will like kind of like it's like he self-destructs because for all that he wants this guy to be a villain, he's not. And so you can see why Eddington, who's clearly also an egotist, would really want to identify with the hero of it. I thought that was kind of cool when Sisko, and also a little scary when Sisko is like, all right, I'll play his game. And he's like, I'll go and drop some radiation on these guys, and give him a taste of his own medicine and be the villain he wants me to be. That was unnerving, and I suspect a big, in some ways, turning point for Sisko based on just broadly what I kind of know about how things play out in DS9.
Well, maybe that the stuff with Admiral Watley has started to go to Sisko's head. Like, oh yeah, like Starfleet can't fire me, so I'm just gonna do what I want from now on for the rest of the show. I'm done asking permission. Sisko's gonna Sisko, But depending on who you ask, this is either Sisko proving he's the most badass Starfleet captain, or him proving he's the worst Starfleet captain. I've heard some people condemn Sisko because of this episode. They thought that it was just in the wrong to poison those colonies and drive those colonists off. I've also seen there's a lot of memes of a commander launch torpedoes. So if you've ever seen those or wondered where those come from, they come from this episode. Like how all the captains have to have their catchphrase now,
Right.
hit it, let's fly. Whatever, but sometimes they'll show those memes, and it'll show like Picard and he's saying engage, and then it'll show Sisko and he's saying commander launch torpedoes.
It's interesting. I have to kind of take a nuanced view of it. I kind of can't see it as being like just purely badass or anything like that, because I'm not completely convinced that Sisko is in the right here going after the Maquis. And I feel like he's a hard guy. Like he's in a hard situation, and he did do something that won him the day. But it didn't make me think, oh, this is the guy I want on my side. It made me think, oh, boy, war can drive you to war crimes, can't it?
Well, I mean, he didn't kill anyone. He just drove them off of the planet that they're not supposed to be on anyways. And
right.
The Cardassians they kind of get to swap planets, like they're using these very convenient ways of poisoning the planet. Like, here, this is lethal to Cardassians, but not lethal to us. So the Cardassians have to leave. And then here it's like, oh, this is lethal to everyone but the Cardassians, so they can come live here.
Right. If not committing a war crime in the in a truly horrific sense, he at the very least essentially adopted the tactics of the Maquis, which arguably reduces his his moral perspective. As far as that goes, like he has branded this guy as the enemy, and then he adopts his tactics to win. It is like it's a cool moment, but it's also kind of messed up. I don't know. I loved it. I thought it was great, though. I also noticed I always kind of pay attention to music, and most of the Next Generation and Onward era stuff hasn't. Until I guess to modern times hasn't. They wanted more subdued music. That was part of was it Roddenberry's thing, right?
Rick Berman's.
Rick Berman. Okay.
You wanted the music to be wallpaper,
right? And it was a lot of times, but there was some really good stuff in this. The scene, two scenes that jumped out for me. Let's see, I jotted it down. One was the sort of grim spiraling music when he's taken off the assignment. It's just like getting lower and lower, and it's like really intense. And then also when they launched the damaged Defiant to bring in Eddington, there's this pretty energetic music.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
All that stuff with Nog on board shouting out orders, and them having to do a lot more background chatter to keep things going because so many systems were down. It was such an energetic presentation of it that it almost made me wish that was just the norm. It feels much more like a military enterprise, and I've talked about I don't want Trek to feel too military at times, but I've watched so many.
Or a military starship.
Yeah.
It's the Defiant, not the Enterprise.
I mean Enterprise in the other sense of the word.
That's what the Packlids do that in Lower Decks. They call like every Federation ship. They always like, it's the Enterprise. Look, there's another Enterprise. I'm like, Dave does that all the time. Like Voyager, Cerritos, Discovery, like they're all Enterprise to him.
Yeah, that's not how I meant Enterprise. I meant it as an undertaking, motherfucker. Anyway, but yeah, like it's one of those things where I was like, man, this presentation is really effective. It is both cool and also kind of not what I want in Starfleet, but it felt right for that moment. So
well, yeah, they had to be like a more primitive ship. Half their systems were down.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
but
it's funny because they do that and they're all geared up and like, let's go kick some ass, and then Eddington kicks their ass again.
It's so embarrassing when your ship has to get towed back to the station.
Yeah.
But then Captain Sanders on his ship, the Malinche, like they get their ass kicked by Eddington too. So it's kind of like, see, he's not that easy to deal with. So,
I looked up that name Malinche to see if it had any special meaning. Do you know about this, Fatheree?
Yeah, it's Aztec Indian.
Yeah, it's related to a woman who I think she was like an Aztec woman who became the lover of Cortez. At a quick glance, it looked like she had is broadly considered in some places to have sold out the Aztecs. Yeah, she's a traitor, and I just thought that was an interesting. I was like, maybe Starfleet's not their best naming choice there.
Well, maybe there's like another cool Malinche at some point between now and the 24th century.
Maybe so. Although I think they meant it more to. To probably reflect maybe at least a little bit poorly on the guy who takes the job from Sisko, or the moral ambiguity of this episode.
I think it was just kind of talking about Eddington as like the traitor.
Yeah, I suppose so. Although it's interesting that it wasn't his ship, though. He gets the heroic ship, but of course that's built into the story. Anyway, I love the episode. Yeah. Really good.
Yeah, now Eddington is off in prison, but as Garrick and Cassidy Yates have proven, that doesn't mean that you're off the show just because you get sent to prison. We'll move on to the next two episodes are a two-parter, but in Purgatory's Shadow and by Inferno's Light, they were both written by Ira Stephen Bear and Robert Hewitt Wolf. In Purgatory's Shadow is directed by Gabriel Beaumont, and by Inferno's Light was directed by Les Landau. But this is the pivotal episodes. The synopses on them are: in order to ward off a Dominion invasion, Sisko must close the wormhole, leaving Worf and Garrick stranded in a Jem'Hadar internment camp on the other side. And the Klingons join the Federation's fight against the Dominion as Gul Dukat reveals his self-serving allegiance. He basically betrays the entire Alpha Quadrant.
Right. Yeah. I was like, man, Gul Dukat, what a jerk. He's not treating his daughter with respect. He's trying to manipulate her life. This guy, for all the times that I can sometimes respect and like him, he's a big jerk. Oh my gosh. that was just the start of his betrayals. So Fatheree, by the way, I didn't know this was going to be a two-parter. I did see that there was like some titles that looked similar, right. Or like they had a thematic through line, but I didn't know this was going to be a two-parter. And whereas on many series, I actually don't kind of like the multi-part episodes. Deep Space Nine almost always comes through for me, and this was another case of coming through big time. So it was a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I know you don't like to know when they're two-parters, so I never tell you ahead of time.
It's always appreciated.
But did you know the Cardassians were going to team up with the Dominion? Did you know that this thing was?
If it had been told to me, I either willfully forgot it or just forgot it. So that was I was completely shocked by that.
Because this blew my mind as a kid when I saw this back in '97, and it is a huge event in the show. The show is very different in a lot of ways going forward past this. It was a big game-changing event, and it kind of helps.
Well, you say that, but it's funny. The next episode after the two-parter is kind of a self-contained episode that's a little bit more. It's a done in one episode, Monster of the Week kind of thing.
Yeah, they never stopped doing those in Deep Space Nine. But yeah, it's
but like the big plot stuff, I assume.
Quo, the bigger status quo of the show is very different. now with the Dominion having a presence within the Alpha Quadrant.
It's another case of like me thinking like, oh, I like one of the things I like best about Deep Space Nine is the sort of the level of sort of intelligence on the part of the antagonists, and that's always included Dukat. The notion that like him selling them out, it's one of those things where I like it because you look back and you say it makes sense. It feels like the right play for him and the Cardassians based on their history.
Right. You got to think like with Dukat, the situation he's in, he sided with the civilians who overthrew the military government in the Cardassian Union. He's basically, I guess, like the I don't know, a joint chief of staff or something, or secretary of defense. He was like the military advisor to the council. And then, he lost his position when he spared his half Bajoran daughter. And then he ended up, like going rogue, fighting the Klingons. But the Klingons have just like so decimated the Cardassians. And then, the Dominion right in, they're like Xerxes in 300, making the offer to Leonidas. Like instead of fighting us, why don't you join us and help us go conquer Greece in 300? They tell Leonidas like, we'll make you like the warlord of all Greece as long as you'll team up with us with the Persians. Leonidas told King Xerxes to go fuck himself basically. But Gul Dukat says, oh yeah, you're going to restore the Cardassian people, get all of our territory back. You're going to put me like back on the throne. Yeah, sign me up. I'll totally make this deal with the devil.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I also liked, the way it kicks off is interesting. There's
the signal from Tane to Garrick.
Yeah, it's it's funny because you know how I thought that Tane was like a stealth hinted at but strongly hinted at lover of Garrick originally. It's funny how many things still work that way in the dialogue if you want it to. Yes, I know it's his dad. It's creepy, but it's like that sort of sense of loss of somebody who was close to you almost works as if it was a lover too. Anyway, but bigger point is. There's so much stuff going on. There's stuff with Zial, who I didn't love her being close to Garrick, but I do. The portrayal of it is good. Garrick, that actor, is Andrew Robinson.
That's funny. I love the way that they play that because Garrick seems like so like not interested in a romantic relationship with her, where she's just like I just you're like the only other Cardassian dude ever, so in my life, so I'm really attracted to you.
Yeah. Do you think that do you buy into it? Do you buy his interest in her? Because he
doesn't have interest in her.
But he promises her that he's going to come back. That's a pretty.
He doesn't have a romantic. He doesn't have a romantic. And he cares about her as like this. And maybe because I know things from like future episodes, but like
sure.
He's not like he doesn't see her as like a romantic.
Does he have more of a paternal sort of protectiveness to her?
Yeah, I think he's just kind of as just like as a friend or as just some. But like all their scenes together, she's kind of like always like lovey-dovey around him, and he's just kind of like, oh yeah, this is kind of awkward. I'm not as into this as you are.
When he says that, when he promises to return to her or whatever, do you think that's him just saying what he needs to say in the moment? Do you think that's him saying?
No, I think he really does. Like, yeah, like, oh, I promised her like I would come back. Like, I think as like a friend, but I'm saying like he doesn't. And the way, and especially now hearing Andy Robinson talk about how he played Garrick as gay, but yeah, I think yeah, he's like like I'm trying to get back to like that young girl that I want to watch over, but I don't think he's like, oh, like I'm in love with this this woman who like I'm old enough to like be her dad.
That's one of those weird things too. There,
this is the final recasting of Zial, by the way. This actor they have playing her now, they actually keep her through the rest.
She'll be
of
the
on
show. Board.
So yes.
Incidentally, speaking of Garrick, I want to compliment his trolling of Worf about wanting to join Starfleet. That was just cruel and funny.
Yeah, he's joking when he's like, perhaps I should just enter Starfleet as a commander. Tell them that you would love to serve under me. That's like when Worf knew he was joking.
Yeah,
but yeah, he goes on this mission with Worf, so it's kind of cool putting the two of them together. The changeling Bashir tries to stop him at the beginning of the episode, which makes sense. The changeling wouldn't want him nosing around in the Gamma Quadrant when they're about to send their ships over. What about the internment camp? Let's talk about like the stuff there. We have
I
some
have to quick
prisoners.
say. I have to quick say, by the way, it's just a cool visual. I thought the asteroid base looked neat every time they showed it.
We get more world building. We kind of get to see more like Dominion culture and Jem'Hadar culture. But, they have like their fighting pit. Like this is what they do when like they're just standing around bored guarding a prison. Is they study their enemies and they fight them. And you get to see Worf be like Rocky and just like he won't go down. He keeps fighting. He fights all
Mhm.
the Jem'Hadar all the way up to like the Jem'Hadar first.
Yeah, to
Who
the big boss.
Yeah, and I love like the big like boss fight with him where the guy is like I refuse to kill him. I can fight him, but I can't break him. And so like that Jim Hadar like just or fought so valiantly that like
He
it
changed
sparked
how that guy his worldview.
yeah, it sparked like this shred of decency in this Jim
Yeah,
Hadar's
I
heart.
loved it.
And then
That
you see the
early
Dominion
on
reaction to that. The
to
Dominion
kill him.
reaction to that when the Vorta's like, okay, shoot them both. Yeah,
Yeah,
that guy's Worf luckily got beamed out kind of
it was
conveniently, but
It was sure it's a little bit of one of those last minute saves for a
right,
show that's
right.
oftentimes was more like Game of Thrones in the sense that yeah, we don't do last minute escapes until like the last season of Game of Thrones, in which case they did do some last minute
Yeah.
escapes. But anyway, yeah, I loved it because they Worf made a point. He's like the Dominion don't fight with honor or whatever. They don't have any sense of honor about who they are. And yeah, that the notion that and by the way, Michael Dorn did a great job portraying both Worf's exhaustion and the kind of the pain he was dealing with, as well as his kind of utter implacability. His that he would go ahead and die. But there's a point where Worf is like. He is actually, I think, I take that back. He gets pissed at like the Klingons kind of code a little bit too when he says, "What is the point of any of this if it isn't getting us off the ship or off the prison?" But yes, he does like the big arc is that he yeah that this Dominion commander is like, wow, I've changed how I think about him.
We also get the introduction to real Martok. This is not a changeling. He's always been a changeling before. This is the first time we have the real dude, and he is just one of the coolest Klingons in my opinion. I really loved this as a kid because I was so into like Worf and Klingon stuff and having to see Worf fight. But I was like, oh, like this Martok dude is really cool too. He's friendlier than a lot of Klingons. They can come off as like kind of abrasive, but he's like you're talking about like Tane and Garrick. I guess he's kind of like being finding like these comrades in prison. He's like, yes,
Right?
Cardassians are clever people, aren't they? And then
Yeah,
they're like,
he has compliments for him and compliments for Worf.
yeah,
He's like they're gonna write songs about you.
yeah, I'm going to commission a song, and there will be a verse for you, Dr. Bashir, the healer who mended the warrior's wounds. So,
Uh huh.
so yeah, he's a cool dude. I love the ending. He's going to stay on the station. So we have another Klingon on the station now with
Yeah.
Martok. There's a permanent Klingon presence on the station as of now.
Yep, I
Um,
liked all of that stuff. Those Deep Space Nine's big reveals tend to always be very satisfying to me. Um, and by the way, like for that second episode, I'm a big one of my favorite kind of I call it a guy movie because that's kind of just how I thought about it at the time. It's just a good movie, but it is kind of a guy movie. The Great Escape. I love prison break stories. And there's wasn't quite a prison break, but it's a version of it where they're trying to send a signal and just buy time and do all this stuff. And I love like Shawshank Redemption and Escape from Alcatraz, stuff like that. So yeah, that was it was a winner of a trope to build the story around for me.
Yeah, and they kind of all have to do stuff. Garrick having to deal with his claustrophobia, which comes up again is his claustrophobia. That's not just like a one-time
Hmm,
thing.
that's
Um,
interesting. I thought it might be a one-time thing.
yeah, Bashir, not only having to do like cool doctor stuff, but also like when they're fighting the guards, the way that Bashir like cuts that one Jem'Hadar's
Mhm.
tube, that Ketracel white tube, is like,
Yeah,
oh look, like the doctor did like the calculated, surgical precision strike. That's kind of cool. Um, Kane almost admitting his love for it. He can't bring himself to do it. All he can say is like, I was
uh,
proud of you that day that you kept getting on the riding hound. I was very proud
yeah,
of you that day. Apparently
yeah.
the
Like,
only day they were ever father and son.
yeah, man. Um, I like when I like when Deep Space Nine is cruel, and
Hmm.
that's a pretty cruel scene. It sort of redoubles, I guess, Garrick's energy for a moment because isn't like afterwards. I think he's like, "We're getting out of here now" or whatever.
Yeah, like now that his business is done, yeah, I
But
think he
but
says
it's
something
also
like,
it was also a scene where I was like, "Man, that's kind of crushing." Is
mm,
that like this was the opportunity for emotional catharsis, and it's denied.
denied.
But it's also what he threw was like the best he could, and like on some level, I guess Garrett kind of appreciated that.
Yeah, because this
Um,
guy he's been like, the head of the KGB, the head of the CIA, whatever. Like all his life, like he denied himself, like he can't have any weaknesses, he can't have any
well, yeah, the
vulnerabilities, and so
last things he's requesting of Garrick isn't. It's like
yeah,
did I get all my enemies? That is the revenge complete?
yeah, he's like, I somehow rewired this life support system into a communicator to contact the station to bring you here, just so my dying request could be for you to get revenge against the Dominion on my behalf.
Hmm.
But Garrick agrees to it. I guess he says like, well, ask me as father to his
Right.
son, and but yeah. So it seems Garrick might have renewed interest. He's kind of always been very anti-Dominion, but perhaps especially now. So all the prison stuff was cool, and the stuff with Bashir on the station, what he does to the station, this kind of confused me when I first saw this way back when. But there was an idea that if the Dominion were ever going to invade the Alpha Quadrant, it would be easy to prevent because all DS9 had to do was shoot a tachyon beam or whatever at the wormhole. They could
Hmm.
permanently collapse it. They could close the gateway permanently. But because of what the Bashir
Well, actually,
changeling
didn't they say that they could probably reinstate it? That there was a way to make it reversible? I thought that they indicated that. That's why, by the way, when they were getting ready to do it, I thought they were gonna. I thought that was gonna be like a new status quo for a while.
Yeah, instead they just lose that ability. It's like, oh, not only did we not close it, but we've made it permanently open. We'll
Yeah,
never be able to close it now.
yeah. It's another one of those cases of showing how effective their enemies are.
Yeah,
Um,
and the way that they draw the Klingon Starfleet and Romulan fleets all to the Bajoran system, so that they were going to light the sun
yeah,
on Nova
it's a
and
big
and wipe them
plot.
all out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some pretty heavy duty planning. But generally, their heavy duty plans like that have been going pretty well. They've done their infiltration. They took over the Klingon Empire for a time. They've had a lot of big successes, I guess.
The thing that kind of bugs me is when Kira and Dax are talking about how like you're not supposed to go to warp within a solar system, which was
Mhm.
established in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. But then we see Star Trek ignore that and like do it all the time. So I'm like, this is the only time anyone I think ever adheres to
Yeah,
that instead of ignoring it. But
yeah. And by the way, is there anything? Were there any repercussions? They're like, we have to just do it, and then, as I recall, like it's like their ship doesn't like look like it's about to shake apart or
yeah, it doesn't
anything.
like go. It's not like in a wormhole with
I guess they were
Chekhov
just like
saying
it was.
arm
I guess they were
torpedoes.
just like it was risky. It
Yeah,
could have gone bad.
that's
By
how
the
it
way,
was supposed
didn't
to
they
come
say
off.
that there was some proto matter in that mix?
Yes.
I always notice anytime DS9 tips a hat to TOS or the TOS movies, any kind of
It
classic
had
stuff.
both proto matter and trilithium, which is
Yep.
what Malcolm McDowell was trying to use in Star Trek Generations to blow up stars. So,
Oh, wow, nice. That's a nice touch.
who is Alexander Siddig's uncle? And so we got to see Malcolm McDowell try to blow up a sun in Generations, and then here we see his nephew as this
Hmm.
changeling try to blow up a sun.
That's a beautiful passing of the torch there.
But yeah, the Dominion are tricky. They have those fake warp signatures. They're like, where's the invasion? And it's like, oh, we're actually not even invading. We're just, but it shows the Dominion being so powerful. The Klingons are just kind of just marching all over Cardassian space. And then
Hmm.
the Dominion shows up and drives them all out. Galron has to retreat back to the station. We get the Khitomer Accords reinstated. So I like that. I love Klingons, but I'm more of a fan of like I think it's more interesting when the Klingons are friends and not our enemies. I mean, they make great bad guys too, but I think it's fun to
Right.
see Starfleet and Klingons working together.
Yeah, well, this is sort of one of those things we talked about. The difference between Star Trek and Star Wars sometimes is that Star Trek seems to evolve things, evolve the situations, and when the Federation is doing their best work, they manage to make allies out of their enemies. And it doesn't mean it's always like a perfect thing. That's the kind of realism that I like in it. Um,
There's a wonderful line from Galron I love. It's one of my
mm,
favorite lines in the whole show. But it's when Galron says, think of it. 5 years ago, no one had ever heard of
mm,
Bajor or Deep Space Nine, and now all our hopes rest here. Where the tides of fortune take us, no man can know. And then Sisko says, they're tricky, those tides. But
mhm.
yeah, it's like kind of like an acknowledgement of like, yeah, like no one cared about like Deep Space Nine, but it's actually like the most important show right now. Like back when this came out, like Next
Yeah, it
Generation is
has.
off doing movies, Voyager is off in the Delta Quadrant where it doesn't like affect anything back home. It's like here's where like the real shit is going on.
It's a meta statement, yeah, about them. Um, I
Oh,
wonder.
they
I wonder
mentioned
if.
First Contact too, by the way. When Cisco, their fleet is spread thin, and Cisco says part of that is the recent Borg attack. You know, when that Borg cube goes to Earth at the beginning of Star Trek First Contact, and it's just wiping ships out left and right. So Starfleet's still kind of recovering from that.
Makes sense. I wanted to mention real quick a few lines from Gold Dukat that stayed with me. I loved when he's talking to Kira after the betrayal, and he says, "You and I on the same side." It never quite seemed right, did it? it's uh, it's just that's also a little bit of meta context about like, oh man, yeah, was it strange that he was allowed to kind of hang out on the station? That piece of shit. But I liked it. And I liked his speech to the Cardassian people, where
Hmm.
it's a propaganda speech and all that. And he's like, "Oh, the Dominion recognizes as the true leaders of the Alpha Quadrant," and he's making promises. He's talking about their future greatness. It's super nationalism stuff. It's the way people do. And um, so yeah, just good job from Ducat on that stuff. As far as making me buy into his villainy and his self interest and his nationalism.
And I love Ducat and Garrick hate each other so much. Like, remember when Garrick was gonna go back to team up with Tane and rejoin the Obsidian Order? And one
Yeah.
of the first things he says way back, this is in season 3, in the Die is cast, but one of the first things he says to Tane is like, "There's this one goal. His name is Ducat. We need to take him out immediately. Let's kill him." And Tane's like,
Yeah.
"Okay, that won't be a problem." Then here, when Ducat is in power, they're like, free all of the Cardassian prisoners from the Dominion prison. Oh,
Yeah.
except for you, Garrick. We have orders to murder you.
Yep. Yeah. No. It's that's kind of like the equivalent of saying we don't consider you a Cardassian. Yeah, you are cast out.
Yeah,
Which
Ducat would
boy,
have given them like
Ducat has faced a lot. Or not Ducat. Garrick has faced a lot of that in his life.
yeah. Um, Ducat would have put in a request to have him killed, and the reason I think the only reason why Ducat gets so mad at Zial here, because I think he legitimately does have, as twisted as he is, I think he did have feelings for Zial. He couldn't bring himself to kill her. I know that's a very low bar, but he couldn't bring himself to murder her in indiscretion in season 4.
Hmm.
I think the only he pleads her to like leave the station here. I think
Hmm.
the only reason why he kind of gives up on her is because like she she is in love with Garrick, or wants to be friends with Garrick, or whatever that relationship is.
Hmm.
He's so egocentric. He's like, Kira, you did this, you designed this on purpose just to spite me. It's
Yeah.
always got to be about him. He's all about himself. But yeah,
Right.
I think that's the only reason why he tells Sisko at the end, like Zial made her choice, is the fact that like that just was such a personal betrayal to him. Like he can't he probably would have been able to forgive anything else except for just something like betrayal, like
Well, right. We know he has a creepy romantic interest in Kira,
right.
and I can see him probably like having and I don't know if maybe this happens later too, like wanting to extend some sort of peace offering, to make her a concubine or something like that. But yeah, because because the worst thing you can do is betray his self-interest. Yeah, that's off the table, at least at the moment.
But he had a path at redemption, you know, like he seemed to care about his daughter. He cares about like what Kira thinks about him. Like if he could have just like gotten over his whole like superiority complex and having to, you know, prove like the Cardassians are the greatest people and I'm the greatest
Hmm.
Cardassian. If he could have gotten over all of that, he was in a position where he could have formed an alliance with the Federation, with Bajor. He probably could have done things to make amends for all of his terrible war crimes. Could have like brought peace between like the Cardassians and the Klingons and ended that war and have like a united Alpha Quadrant to stand against the Dominion. And instead, you know, he sold all of that out because he wanted the option that was going to reflect the superiority and the entitlement is, you know, what he feels he's entitled to, like the position of power that he feels like he deserves.
It's always scary when a single person has that much power in their hands, when they can like throw the fate of millions or billions into the fire over ego, or yeah, or just their own hyper nationalism.
Yeah, and this episode goes a long way
It's a
into
good
why
portrayal of it.
this episode goes a long way into like why I and many other people, you know, consider Dukat the best villain in the entire franchise.
Yeah, it's it's kind of hard for me to quite compare him. I've probably talked about this before, to Khan, who kind of has a singular, very focused, and really beautifully and intensely written story over just one episode,
He has two stories,
one movie. Yeah,
or actually three. He has three movies. One's an alternate timeline, though. He has
yeah.
three stories. One's an
All
alternate
right, but that's
timeline.
not what people are talking about when they call Khan the best villain. Nobody's referencing that movie. But anyway, but Dukat has a very unique thing. Is they made him a long term villain, and he's a long term villain that works better than any other villain that they've had, and that any other attempts they've made to do the same.
Well, let's move on to our next episode, which is a more lighthearted episode after all the big intensity. But this is season 5, episode 16, Dr. Bashir, I presume. Teleplay
By
by
the way,
Ronald
Fatheree,
D.
sorry, before you go into that, I'm going to just quick say one funny line from the previous episode. I just wanted to mention it from Dax. When Quark is worried that about the Dominion potentially occupying DS9 and him having, a bunch of like sexless.
Zial. I know what you're going to say, but it's from Zial, not Dax.
Oh, is it Zial? Is it?
Yeah.
About the Vorta?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was, no, it's Dax.
I promise you it's Zial.
Okay. Oh yeah, you know what? You're right. You're right. Now that I'm thinking about it,
she was eating asparagus with yamek sauce.
Yeah, that's right. And she says the Vorta could be glutinous, alcoholic sex maniacs. That's her pick me up to him. So yes, I will use that to transition into an episode with some lighter stuff in it.
So Dr. Bashir, I presume, teleplay by Ronald D. Moore, story by Jimmy Diggs, directed by David Livingston. Dr. Zimmerman chooses Bashir as the model for the holographic doctor program, unaware that it will cause Bashir anguish and his father's sacrifice. Dave, this is an episode that I was always scared would get spoiled for you. The reveal that Dr. Bashir, like Khan, we were just talking about, is a genetically enhanced augment. I was so nervous that, like, during all the talk of La'an Noonien Singh on Strange New Worlds, people would make comparisons to Bashir. Did we make it to this episode without you finding out about that? Was that something you knew?
It's something I knew. Yeah. I unfortunately I knew it, but I kind of knew it in the back of my head. It was like one of those things where I wasn't thinking about it most of the time. I didn't know any context for it. I didn't know what the genetic engineering meant, but sometime over the last year or two, I had bumped into it. And then I actually, no, I was going to say that this is not the secret I learned. I learned the thing about the changeling.
Right.
Actually ahead of time, but this one I hadn't been reminded of, so it was kind of like I never knew when it was going to surface. I think when he said, "Oh, please don't involve my parents in this deal," I was like, right, this is the thing with it. I figured it out then, but it still, I guess I'd say it still worked as a reveal pretty well for me. That hadn't been so spoiled where I was like, anticipating every turn or anything like that.
I've been tiptoeing around this for years because I never wanted to mention it, but I guess I didn't have to worry about it that much, but
Eh, I don't know exactly when I learned about it. It could have been from comments in our responses. It could have been a comic I read that was like a Deep Space Nine comic that just casually mentioned that he had some genetic engineering. But like in a way, I was like, I guess because he's never doing big Superman stuff. He's never doing
oh, is
con
he?
stuff,
Well,
picking up a
he
guy.
no, he doesn't have like that level of strength, but he does a lot of superhuman stuff over the course of the show. And this was kind of a last minute idea. This is a retcon, but it fits in so perfect. Like if you just like I'm
Yeah, I
just gonna
read a
throw out
thing where Ron Moore or somebody was talking about that and saying that it's kind of answered a lot of things.
right.
And I think that's neat. I like that kind of stuff that where a retcon that fits and adds to builds to the tapestry of a character or a story. But like in other words, I didn't see him using con strength in particular. He seemed to be pushing himself the same way a lot of Starfleet doctors did, McCoy and Crusher. But yeah, so like when you start like if you look at certain scenes, they don't all add up, and that was kind of a nice way to explain it. I'm usually mentally perfectly able to say, oh, yeah, there's a little incongruity between various writers' versions. No big deal. But yeah, that's neat when you can find something that works.
Yeah, like the way that he was beating the shit out of O'Brien at racquetball, and then he started like letting O'Brien win. And O'Brien was like, "Wait a minute, why are you letting me win? I know you're letting me win." And he
Right.
says,
And
"I
I thought
want,"
he was just letting him win. Yeah.
and he said like, "I wanted to go pro, but instead like I became a doctor." Like, yeah, because like if you went pro, maybe that they would have exposed you at some point. Like why are you so good at racquetball? Or like in Our Man Bashir when Garrick is like, I just want to end the Holosuite program and get out of here. Who cares if these other people live or die? And then Bashir like shoots him where like the bullet just grazes across his neck and like doesn't
Hmm.
doesn't injure Garrick, which is like kind of like a warning shot. And then Garrick is like, how the hell did you shoot that accurately? And Bashir just said something like, how do you know I wasn't aiming to kill you? But it's like, oh yeah, this is the guy who can do like the triple bullseye at the end of the episode. So he has like the good aim. In um the episode with Jake, nor the battle to the strongest, when he runs out to get the generator in the runabout with Jake, they make a big deal like it'll take two people to drag this generator back into the cave. And then later they're like, somehow that doctor got the generator here by himself. So
Right.
yeah, but yeah, like he doesn't have like the con level of strength, but he does have like some physical capabilities.
Yeah. No, it's a neat thing I imagine for them to play around with afterwards. I don't know how much they pay attention to it. Do they pay attention to it? You
Yeah,
can
yeah,
spoil that.
it comes up a lot. I think this was kind of hard on Alexander Siddig because, like, first of all, like, I think he kind of felt betrayed. Like, oh, I'm a changeling now. Like, I wish you had told me I hadn't been playing that. Or like now he's like, oh, I'm genetically enhanced and have been all along. Like, I wish you had told me I hadn't been playing that. So a lot of actors get kind of frustrated with stuff like that. But
Sure.
I know
Although
it's not
arguably
uncommon to.
the changelings were so good at their job that they, I actually expected once I knew about it, I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those stories where he says something he shouldn't know, and they're like, Brian will be like, wait a minute, but I was like, no, no, man, he didn't get busted until he was like seconds from committing his plan, right? So yeah, like I get why Siddig would feel that way, of course, but yeah, the changelings were supposed to be really damn good at their job.
The meat of this episode to me is like the stuff with his parents, especially his dad Richard, and like those
Hmm.
conversations when they're yelling at each other. I really kind of like I kind of buy into all those characters' perspectives. Like I get Bashir being like, you just decided I was a failure. Like maybe I could have had like a happy life. We were in the Federation after all. It's not like I would ever have had
All right.
to want for anything.
This
All
is
of my
sort of very
needs would have been
relevant
provided.
to questions that we have now. I mean, like I see these questions and debates going on, and especially in discussions about autism, just among other things. But like you could apply it to so many different things, and a question of yeah, how much are you willing to work with that and say that is who that person is, and not, oh, this person needs to be fixed.
Yeah, a lot of the things like his mom is saying, like, you don't understand like how guilty we felt. Like, did we not do enough for you? Is it something I did wrong during the
Well,
pregnancy? Like, I have
I have to.
a
Well, go ahead.
I have a uncle who has he has an autistic son who's I don't know what the right I don't know if you would say like severe autism, but I mean like he's like completely non-vocal. He's like very, very, very dependent. But I mean, like he's a happy kid. Like he's happier than, how old is he now? Like 15. He's happier than most 15s, like 15-year-olds I know. So like, but I know like his parents always feel, they've put him on like a bunch of like weird diets and stuff, tried to do like everything like help him, or like maybe like they even get into some weird pseudoscience stuff at times and have weird opinions on vaccines. But it all comes from like a concern of like our kid has all these like disadvantages. What can we do to let's put so much effort into doing everything we can to help them. But yeah, so I think about that when I watch this.
What was interesting to me about this episode is as I'm watching it, it's the first time I've seen it, and I don't know that that's going to be the case until the end. Mostly you kind of find out negative things about his parents as it builds. And by the way, just a quick aside, I really like seeing Robert Picardo. Of course, he's always a fun shot in the arm. But I'm a little like, in some ways, I ended up a little like in the comments, Thomas Hill, who I think he was talking about this episode, said he liked but didn't love it. But it struck me that this episode was like, I was never a big fan of the Loaxana Troy episodes. She's just she usually was more frustration than she was a sympathetic character to me.
Yeah, she's a bit much.
She's a bit much, with the occasional exception. This was an episode that felt more like what I kind of wanted her episodes to be, where there was this kind of cathartic release at the end. The parents were able to kind of ultimately do right by their kid, and do the best they could, and be flawed, but try do this thing. And I didn't expect that was going to happen along the way. I thought this was going to be kind of an episode where maybe he made some grudging peace with them, but he was, it was going to be kind of like, those parents, man, they're a problem. So I liked the ending quite a bit. It kind of turned the episode around for me.
His dad is going to go to the New Zealand prison that we saw Tom Paris in the beginning of Star Trek Voyager.
Is it really? Is it the same place?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many penal colonies are in New Zealand in the 24th century. I would assume just the one.
No, that's it. I really didn't pay attention to location or anything on that, but they've certainly had already done a few things. They'd mentioned the Badlands that would kick off Voyager, and I noticed that like Chakotay's ship is the Valjean, and so I was like, oh right, this completely ties in as a homage to Eddington's kind of mythology. That's neat. Anyway, I've been noticing little connections to Voyager like that.
And with, of course, Robert Picardo being on the show and replacing the EMH. We got that little gag moment where the Mach 1 EMH is scoffing at Bashir, saying, please state the nature of the medical emergency. Like, well, that's not very original. But they also show the holo communicator here. It's the last we see of it. They decided it just didn't work. You couldn't really tell if the person was there on the set, right, or if they're like,
they couldn't make them if they were transparent, it would probably have gone a long way.
Yeah, you have to show it like glitch out every now and then to remind you it's a hologram. They have the B story here though with Lita, and with Dr. Zimmerman pursuing her, and then of course her choosing Rom at the. I love that moment. The what's that noise? It's getting louder. What is this? And it's Rom going, wait, as he's running to the docking ring.
I have to say, like, unfortunately, this like I love Rom overall as a character, but like I thought this was a little too shticky for me. It kind of reminded me of like the frustration of watching. There was some old episode of Happy Days where I think I've even mentioned this before, where like Fonzie couldn't apologize. It just wasn't in him to do it, and he like literally couldn't make the words happen. And I felt like Rom's sort of difficulties saying anything to Lita was a little clunky like that.
A bit more real. Like a lot of people have a hard time like taking that risk when you tell someone you're romantically interested in them.
It's pretty universal, that basic thing. It's only I think their portrayal was a little campy.
How shitty is Quark though? Because Quark knows that Lita is into Rom. Lita said that on Ryza. She's like, yeah, I'm breaking up with Julian, and I actually I want to hook up with your brother. So he knows, and he's still telling. He's like, you're wasting your time. Forget about her. Remember what happened with Nog's mother? Like, what a shitty asshole thing to do.
It's true. I thought about this, of course, in this episode, and the final one we'll talk about. is like Quark. They both want him to be a lovable and sometimes even a bad guy with a like skeevy dude with a heart of gold, and then they sometimes want to portray him as kind of unrepentantly shitty. And yeah, that's horrible. I mean, he was thinking about maybe possibly, rolling with killing millions in a few episodes, but yeah, like turning his back on his brother. That's really messed up. That's it is funny how we think about those things. I did, by the way, I did crack up though when he said when she's like, "Do you have something to say to me or whatever?" And he's like, "Bye." That's the delivery on that
Yeah,
was
or
pretty
like
great.
she's trying hard. Like when she's like, "Do I
Yeah,
have any reason to remain on the station?" Like at that point, like I
yeah.
like Lita, like like you have the option to like ask him out on a date or something. Like
It's
you
true.
know.
It's true. They were still a little bit into '90s tropes there. Yeah, and honestly, that's where I think it falls a little bit apart. Is I think a lot of people when they have trouble like asking out a girl and like or you don't pick up on signals or whatever. I I get it up until the point where it's like as obvious as she was being. I felt like, oh, that's almost kind of too heavy handed when she's like, "Gee, I just sure wish someone else would ask me out." Wink, wink. And I'm like, I feel
I
like you
mean,
should get it.
if anything else, she could do the junior high thing and go tell Chief O'Brien. Be like, I really like your friend Rom. Will you tell him that I really like him? Like like
Yeah, I
do
actually
that
would have been.
technique.
I would have kind of liked seeing O'Brien have to be forced into that role. I think that'd be pretty good. He'd be like, okay,
He's got his hands full with the baby.
yeah,
But yeah, speaking of O'Brien, I like that little tag at the end of like, oh, well, how are we going to shoot darts now? And it's like, oh, well, I'll throw from here and you'll throw from way back here. And if that doesn't work, we'll try a blindfold.
yeah. I like that they were able to adjust their hangout time to meet the new situation, and it wasn't like something where it's like, oh, I guess we can't hang out and do darts and stuff anymore. I'm like, yeah, that's good. That's good. Work with the new facts you learn about your friend. That's being a good bro.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next episode. We got two more to
Okay.
talk about real quick. This next one is season 5, episode 17, A Simple Investigation, written by Renee Echeverria and directed by John Kretschmer. Dave, I was thinking that you would really like this episode, but sometimes I call it wrong. Like, was I right or wrong?
You're wrong.
Okay.
um. Let's see. So this is
Oh, I'll read the synopsis.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's
Hit me with it.
Odo falls in love with a woman searching for information that ultimately will endanger her life and make their relationship impossible.
Right. It's one of those episodes where I actually liked notable parts of it. I thought that sometimes when they kind of do the noir stuff, that they're a little too on the nose. Like it felt like too much like she was playing him, like in a traditional noir way. Even though they did have like some twists to come on that. But I also like some of the developments. I like Odo getting his moment. I like that they actually spent so much time showing them talking in bed and stuff like that. I like those kind of relatable moments and it was kind of sweet. Um, I liked some of the trip, I guess I'd say. I always like hearing the Orion Syndicate.
Yeah, I told you they would be coming back, so
Yeah,
we have more Orion Syndicate. I like that the episode opened with like those two hitmen
yeah,
killing their target on accident, and like I don't know, kind of I thought they were like believably like dumb. They weren't like goofuses. Like you could still take
yeah.
them seriously. But yeah,
I agree.
like they yeah, they seemed like guys that probably like yeah, they turned to a life of crime at some point.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. They're effective. They're kind of scary in the sense that
Yeah.
you know that they're probably going to carry out any order that's given to them, but they're a little bit amusing to watch eating sandwiches and shit.
Oh yeah, the Hasperat, which is really like a turkey wrap.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought there's sometimes I did like the noir dialogue where she's like, oh, am I supposed to think you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart? And he's like, he kind of takes the literal, I don't have a heart. And she's like, you could have fooled me. And I was like, oh, that's kind of sweet. That's a good bit.
And we get our James Bond holosuite program back very briefly when Odo has to go ask Julian Bashir for dating advice. He kicks
Yeah, I like
Lady
the.
Wants Some More was the name of that Bond girl. But yeah, they
I
kick
missed
her out of
that.
the limo and
Yeah, I actually liked the attempting to line up the schedule for the holodeck and stuff like that. Couldn't help but
yeah.
remind me of role playing game
Yeah.
stuff. But I guess I suppose adults trying to get together at
Yeah,
all
adults
in
who
general.
play like D&D and other like role-playing
Sure.
game type things. It's hard to
Um,
schedule. It's like a joke in that community. It's like it's impossible to schedule.
Totally. And so I liked the portrayal of the mid holodeck interruptions. I loved seeing O'Brien back as was it Falcon?
Yeah.
Is that his villain? That was
Car
great.
trouble, Mr. Bashir. Oh, hi, Odo.
Yeah, he was having some fun with it. After having him griping about it early on, like do I have to play Falcon again? I want to be a good guy, and then it looked like he was having fun with it. um,
But I thought you would like the Odo and bed stuff. Like his, I think it's really interesting. Like
I did.
seeing him kind of like exploring intimacy. You know, he had been reading about this when he was a solid. He was like,
Yeah.
okay, well maybe I want to try my hand at romance. And then he gets re-changelinified, and he's like,
Yeah.
oh, I guess I lost that opportunity. But it's like, oh no, I'm actually. I can still make love to this woman as a changeling. Let's experiment with that. And
Yep.
I don't know.
Before we
I thought it
quite
was treated very maturely.
it
It feels like
was.
very adult to me.
And I also felt like I liked that the crew, although I don't like them kind of gossiping and spreading stuff around about him, but I liked that they were
That
kind
was
of all.
realistic though. That felt real.
I felt like they were doing a good job backing his play, and I liked, I don't know if it was this episode or previous one where Kira said, well, he's like, oh, love is for solids or whatever, and she's like, you're a solid 18 hours a day. I thought that was a
Yeah.
really sweet thing, and yeah, I think this was one of their more mature portrayals of it. There was like really. There was no gag really about it, other than like when you hear his changeling sound as he's doing something below decks with her.
Yeah,
It sounds like
you can't see what his other hand is doing. Um
that's dirty, Deep Space Nine. Take that to the Vulcan love slave programs.
but I like the scene with Kira when he's staring at his reflection in those cargo containers, and Kira's like, "Odo, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, this woman told me I have bedroom eyes. I'm trying to figure out if what she was talking about." And I like that she's like very encouraging. Um
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that the reflection thing comes up in the next episode too. Quark does that thing where he pauses to look at his own reflection.
yeah, he also has prophetic dreams like Sisko. So
Yeah.
that made me think of you because I know that you hate that. But I kind of liked the backstory, like this Orion dude. Dream sounds like a real nasty piece of work, and
They
I
make
like
out they just the way they talk about the Orion Syndicate makes them scarier than they had been. I don't know ever. Even in the original Star Trek, they weren't made out to be that threatening. They don't bring them up that often.
yeah.
It's sad to me that we don't get to see some Orions on Deep Space Nine, but they were trying their best just to build them up with backstory stuff.
Yeah, this is like Rick Berman was against those TOS aliens. He's like, I don't want to see a Tellarite. I don't want to see an Endorian. I don't want to see an Orion. Like you know what you can do? Like show a Bolian. How about we have like a blue Bolian? Okay, you can have blue people but not green people for some reason. Okay, Rick. Until we get to Enterprise when they tried to make up for it. But yeah, the Idanian people, they were kind of just for this episode. They've never appeared in anything before or after this, but yeah, like the Idanian security, they were putting in like a lot of effort. Send this woman in undercover like this dangerous mission to bring this
Hmm.
dude down, and I buy into like that tragedy at the end. It's very hard in television to have a believable love story of like, oh, these two people will meet each other and fall in love over the course of 45 minutes. But
Right.
I thought it was kind of especially if you're young and naive like Odo. You kind of always
Right.
fall hard for your
And
first love.
because I think because they portrayed their sort of post-coital scene as like they portrayed it so well that I think they did a pretty convincing job. I thought it was going to be one of those, and this is this is where the episode also did kind of win me over in at least parts of for sure. Is I thought it was going to be one of those where she just didn't have any memory of him whatsoever, and he would just be kind of like I guess, I should never have even tried. And instead it's like, no, there was a connection and
Yeah,
she remembers the connection. I
yeah,
like
and
that when that
he gets
happens.
he gets a little bit of I guess payoff at the end when she's like she was real and you loved her, and in her own way, like in some weird way, like she loved you too.
Yep.
But sorry, I got a husband, got to go. You'll never see me again. Bye.
Yeah. Well, for done in one episodes, that's sometimes what the what you got to work with. Like I said, I liked parts of the episode. I think
Hmm,
it was just that
okay.
some of the noir tropes just didn't quite grab me.
The other little thing in here, I think this is probably the last thing I want to bring up, but the gag of Quark locking up the bar, closing time, shutting everything down, and then like Morn, he's like, "Oh shit, Morn is still in here." He's got like unlock the. He's like, "Morn, get out of here, go home, we're closed." So we know that like Morn is in there at breakfast, right? When we would see Rom in there, like getting his breakfast. So like
Hmm.
he's just like, when does Morn go to work? He's just like in the bar from like opening time to closing time.
Maybe he
You know,
doesn't
he has
work.
a job. He's a courier.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if he's like is that supposed to be like a truck driver or like
I wonder if he's a
what is he
courier
doing?
who's
But
so good he can take just select jobs, or is he so bad that he's always late, always missing
I mean, he's
assignments?
got money. I mean, Quark ain't gonna give him free drinks, so
That's true.
he's making some latinum somehow. Um, but yeah, speaking of making latinum,
Yep.
shall we talk about our final episode
Yep. Let's close
of
it out.
this week's podcast? That's going to be Season 5, Episode 18, Business as Usual, written by Bradley Thompson and David Weddle, directed by Sadig Elfidel is how he's credited, but Alexander Sadig, or, whatever you want to refer. People just call him Sid, so that's maybe we should just say that. But yeah, this episode, Quark becomes involved with his cousin Gala's arms dealing business until a rare attack of conscience puts him in a bind. So we finally meet cousin Gala. He has his own moon, and he tried to blow up Quark one time. Now we get to meet him.
I wasn't sure, and I'd become gun shy about looking up stuff on Memory Alpha if we were supposed to remember him from a previous episode.
We'd never
I
seen
just,
him in the flesh before, but he sold Quark that Ferengi shuttle that took them back in time. It actually had like a bomb on it.
the one that was took them to like 1947 or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Wait, why did it have a bomb?
because Gala wanted to blow up Quark.
Why do you want to blow up Cork?
Because like some bad business dealings in the past or
Rivalry or
something. Yeah.
okay.
I think here, he's being so nice to Quark, but he's trying to get out of the arms dealing business, and
Right.
he needed someone to like take his place, and someone that would that Haggith would appreciate. We get the scary dude Haggith. This actor.
I did look him up.
Yeah, he was one of the cops in A Clockwork Orange. I think he was a cop who's like arresting Alex.
Oh.
But
I knew him from Beverly Hills Cop as the bad guy in that, in which
yeah. He was
he
in that
beats up
too.
Eddie Murphy, and I'm like, oh, he's a scary person. I very distinctly remember him as a kid as being like, a lot of the like, because Eddie Murphy's like such a kind of smart ass in that, and most of the people he runs into he can kind of outwit, and this guy is the scary dude he can't.
Yeah, I mean, he's very like Anthony Hopkins type vibes to me, like that level of like sinister, evil British dude who's kind of terrifying.
Yep. Yep.
Uh,
Although in this he kind of. He straight up gets, by the way, a Joe Pesci moment. He does the Goodfellas thing of like trolling Quark that he's in trouble, that he's gonna get messed up, and then he's like, "I had you going" or whatever, and I'm like,
yeah.
he's a cruel bastard.
All the food prepared for the regent, who the regent, by the way, played by another very impressive actor,
Yeah.
Lawrence Tyranny, who
Yeah.
I mainly associate him as as a gangster mobster type character, Joe in Reservoir Dogs.
Correct.
This guy was apparently a psychopath in real life, though.
I've always heard that.
Yeah, he would like get drunk and beat people up. In that movie Reservoir Dogs, he got in a fist fight with Quentin Tarantino.
I don't know if it was on Trek or somewhere else, but like he was carrying a knife around, threatening people, sort of.
Yeah, he was in Star Trek before. He was Cyrus Redblock in The Big Goodbye in season 1 of Next Generation.
That's crazy,
The
because I feel like
holographic
he's a guy
monster.
who probably, I feel like he would have total disdain for science fiction, and then he would probably be like, "I need a paycheck, so I'll put on this dumb fucking makeup."
I think that's
or whatever.
exactly what happened.
But like his performance is good. Like he brings that creepy gravitas to just a handful of scenes.
So about that, he had just had a stroke shortly before they shot this. And if you
Okay.
watch it, his face is kind of like twisted up a little bit sometimes when he's speaking. But he could not remember his lines. And so
I
Alexander
was
said,
wondering about stuff like that because like even the best actors sometimes have trouble with the sci-fi shit.
yeah, and I think this was like just 4 or 5 years before he died. He's been dead like 20 years at this
Okay.
point. But anyways, Alexander Siddig, first time director, uh,
Oh
never done any
man,
directing before, and this guy
he
is
has to wrangle this motherfucker.
this crazy psychopath who has probably murdered people. There's actually like one incident where it sounds like he might have thrown a woman out of a window of a building. Um,
Okay.
so he's having to like feed this guy like not even line by line. It's like 4 words at a time, and
Oh man.
they shot it like that. But his delivery, I mean, he does seem like the scary guy who's not all there. It was very effective when this regent is talking about like, yeah, I want to kill. I want to kill 20 million people at first, and then you have the death toll to rise another 8 million, and then you see Gala and Haggith just being like, oh yeah, like no pro, like this guy is just talking about like the most casual stuff ever, and they're just like, oh yeah, like we can get this order ready for you.
I actually didn't like that. It's one of those things that snapped my suspension of disbelief that that Quark could just a few weeks or maybe like a month or something like that into being an arms dealer would be talking about numbers at that level. It just seemed a little too beyond silly. That I kind of couldn't take it too seriously, and the
What do you
fact that
mean?
like those numbers, like that Quark could be supplying arms to kill millions of people, tens of millions of people.
Those like biogenic weapons.
Yeah, even so, I'm like, actually, if he even considered killing one person, like I feel like for sure we know he's looked the other way at that kind of stuff before, but like if he was like overtly responsible for that, man, I'd have a tough time with it, and so I kind of didn't like him playing around in that territory with him.
Like
Um,
I think a lot of people probably would look at it like, if I sell someone a car, and they choose to like go run over people with that car, that's not really like my fault, right? So he kind of has like that type of
I
of
get the mentality. I guess I suspect that Ferengi have like people nor humans do that. Like they absolutely do that, and they'll do it in much worse situations where they are responsible. They'll create this sort of sense of mentally of plausible deniability. It's all about
Mhm.
that. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive
Like it's
dissonance.
like self-serving cognitive dissonance that they actually want to have happen. And Ferengi are probably amazing at that, where they're just like, it's like, well, it's like I didn't pull those triggers. What are
Right,
you
right.
talking about? If they had brought that up, which Deep Space Nine is sometimes I think quite good at remembering those kind of things that like, yeah, aliens are alien. They sometimes think differently from us, and they could take something that's human and turn it up a little bit. I wish they had done that. Actually, I would have loved it. But um, yeah, I don't know. It was a bit much. I was just like, I didn't need the numbers to be that high because seemed absurd.
I
And
don't
and
think
like
that
if
seems
Quark had been
absurd.
willing
If
to look away for killing 1,000 people, well, that would have been just as bad.
I don't know, like I think like in terms of like all the planets and stuff and star, like 28 million is
I mean, I've kind of joked around about Trek deals in big numbers. If
it
Kirk,
really doesn't though. It can compared to like a bunch of other science fiction properties. I feel like Star Trek is very conservative with a lot of that stuff. Like
maybe, but I
if
feel like
like
sometimes, like
that
especially in
fleet, like
TOS.
the big
Go ahead.
fleet a couple of episodes ago, that was like 50 ships or something. Like if like and stuff like the other Star franchise, it'll be like, oh, here's like 100,000 Death Stars or something like that. It's
Well, I was thinking like especially like TOS, which I feel like I know best. Like the kill count sometimes to show something is bad, whether it's the Doomsday Machine or that giant amoeba, or how destructive the was it the M5 computer was. Like they kind of have some high body count sometimes. Hundreds, thousands, millions. It definitely can happen. It's not just like a star base here and there sometimes. Um, so anyway, yeah, that's I know not to broadly take anything with Quark, any of his solo stories too seriously, But yeah, that was for me. It was just a little beyond the pale.
I didn't have that issue. But I like the idea of them using like the hollow suite as like a legitimate way to demonstrate weapons. I
Yeah.
like the legal loophole of like,
Mhm.
oh, the Bajoran government won't do anything to stop this because Haggath supplied them weapons during the occupation.
You just named the two things that I think I probably liked best about the episode, which I feel are those kind of DS9 details, which was a the clever the legal loophole of the holodeck weapon sales, and B that the Bajorans were like, stay away from this guy. He kept us going during the, what do you call it, the
The
occupation.
occupation, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that stuff, and I would have liked more of it sprinkled around throughout it. I would have liked a little less farce and a little bit more seriousness.
And the beginning of the episode reminds us, yeah, Quark is in incredible financial troubles. He can't do business with the Ferengi Alliance. He's blacklisted
Right.
from them.
I
They
had
they
I
took
had
all
kind of
they
forgotten that.
they
So
they took all of his assets. Yeah, he's got like those black banners in his bar. The liquidator Brunt slapped up in there.
Mhm. I wish
Um,
that this is, in the, especially for the 90s era, when, they still couldn't count on like people watching, binging seasons or anything. I kind of would have liked a little bit of a reminder of how that came about, just to reemphasize to the audience the dire straits he's in. Because, him playing, was it
Tongo
Tongo
with Dax.
with
Yeah,
Dax, and he's looking. Oh, by the way, that I kind of cracked up because it was like somebody who's glued to their phone when he's checking, like, I don't know, what was it, stock reports or
yeah.
whatever, his
That's when he
finances.
he loses like the last bit of money that he
Yeah.
had, which that itself could have been arranged by Gala. If Gala might have been trying to make Quark in an even more desperate
Hmm.
situation somehow, just to make him, vulnerable to.
I think I would have liked that little tidbit.
That
But
conversation also between Gala and Quark about like, look at all those stars out there. Like, wouldn't you just turn a blind eye and let one of them be snuffed out for enough latinum and stuff? It's like, like really creepy conversations
I
like
did
that.
like that. I like that too.
Uh,
Um, there's and I liked, although it was a little campy itself. I did actually kind of like some of the stuff with Yoshi, or Kirayoshi, which I didn't quite catch until I saw the subtitles. I was like, oh, it's a sweet combination of like a traditional family name and Kira in there. That's
yeah,
that's it's
and I
very
like
sweet.
that the O'Briens, they gave their first kid an Irish name, Molly, and then they gave their second kid a Japanese name with
Yeah,
Kirayoshi.
yeah,
Uh,
it's super cool.
and
And I
Worf being the babysitter.
yes, I liked that too. Again, it's kind of a little sticky, but it was cute, and I liked it.
They're gonna
And
run
I
with that, so it's good you like it. We'll see
my
more of that.
favorite, what's that?
They're gonna run the
Oh,
Worf
good.
and Kirayoshi thing.
They've always done Worf and Prune Juice and stuff like that. They've always had some humor related to the big warrior, sometimes doing something kind of
Worf and Molly. He
so
delivered
silly.
O'Brien's first kid
It's true.
on
There's a
TNG.
connection. My favorite line in it was Brian talking to Bashir when he's checking up on the kid, who's, because of all the crying, and O'Brien's like, "Are you just telling me my baby's just sad?" And Bashir's like, "Maybe he's become prematurely aware of life's existential isolation."
Yeah.
Yeah, super good.
And then he's like, maybe he'll be a poet or something.
Yes,
Uh,
that was good. And also Sisko forced to keep everybody's voice down on the promenade when the baby finally falls asleep. This was a good episode to drop something kind of like that in. That's definitely more lighthearted. Um, it is funny though. It's like, oh look, the baby's sleeping, and they're like, all right, back to the genocide story.
yeah, but I like Quark having, whenever the show like pushes him to like the point where he's got to do like the right thing.
Yeah.
I always like seeing it where yeah, like they do remind us consistently that he's a scumbag, but he does have his limits, and I like seeing like how Dax and Sisko were so angry with him, and like that conflict in Quark. I didn't need that dream. I think that dream sequence was a little weird. Um, and also, like, now that you've told me like your dislike of prophetic dreams, I kind of I notice them more now than I have ever
Well,
before.
I guess I didn't think of that one as prophetic. I just felt like that was his conscience eating at him.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
I'm sure it is.
that one was okay conceptually. Like I did sort of think like I broadly I think sometimes with Quark stories like that I want to show at least a somewhat multifaceted side to him. I like the ones like where it's almost like like the one where he was wooing his ex bride.
Oh
I
yeah,
guess.
looking for Parmok in all the wrong places.
Yeah, I liked that one because I felt like a little bit more mature, and ones where I feel like where they're building up to him showing a little bit more nuance and humanity, like the Ascent or this one. I sort of can sense that that's where their destination is, and so I don't always like the marking time part on the path there.
There's another Ferengi episode coming up that we'll discuss next week. But
Okay.
I liked his scheme. I like how they planted the Chekhov's gun earlier in the episode of like, oh yes, it's dangerous, but sometimes profitable if you're dealing with both sides in a conflict. And so like he uses that to bring that general here to the station. And though speaking of body counts,
it was kind of a Yojimbo move.
Yeah.
And also, it reminded me of sort of if you've ever read the Hellblazer Constantine story in comics, where he has to outwit he's dying of cancer.
The demons, yeah,
and he knows that the devil like is like ready to like wreck him when he goes to hell. And yeah, he does a clever scheme where he like sells his soul to like multiple demons and arranges it for like that they all essentially butt heads when they all come for him at the same time.
Yeah, they're all fighting for his soul, so they end up curing his cancer, right, so that he doesn't die.
Right,
because they don't want one of the other ones to get his soul. So,
right.
Yeah, there's also a big movie I don't want to spoil, but it kind of does this as the climax. But the idea of like when you use like there's like multiple sides out to get you, let's use that to our advantage. But yeah, there's a bit of a body.
Sisko specifically gives him, by the way, the approval, I guess, on this one.
Yeah, 28,000,001. When the purification squads not only do they chase Hagath and Gala off the station. But they also successfully assassinate the regent. And when Quark says like, well, I can think of 28 million people who won't mind. And then Sisko's like 28,000,001. So yeah, Sisko approves of that assassination.
Yeah. First he's viral bombing, biological warfare stuff, and chasing to bring in Eddington. Now he's down with assassinations. What's next, Sisko? What's next?
He's accepted that he talks to the prophet. So it's like I said, like he's done asking for permission. Sisko just does from now on.
All right. Well, it'll be it's exciting uncharted territory.
But yeah, we'll have to explore more of that next week because we are done for the night. That's gonna do it. But please come back next week. We're gonna finish off DS9 season 5. Only 8 to talk about next week, but it's gonna be the remainder of the season. Everything from season 5, episode 19, Ties of Blood and Water, on through the season finale, Call to Arms.
Is this one of those season finales that's kind of intense?
I don't know. You'll just have to see for yourself.
Okay. All right.
I mean, they've all been intense, haven't they?
They have. It'd be weird if they weren't. But I'm also I trust in Deep Space Nine to deliver, even if it threw me a curveball and it's like some contemplative episode. I'm down with it.
But yeah, this has been a lot of fun for me. I've always wanted to talk about stuff like Dukat and the Cardassians team up with the Dominion, Bashir's genetic augmentation. So there's going to be big stuff that I'm dying to talk about next week. So that will be live Friday at 7 p.m. Central, or available to listen to wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek, and follow Fatheree on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.